My motto is always be prepared, so I thought I'd take a look at electrical fuse boards, what are sometimes called consumer units. So when you get a power failure, the first port of call obviously is to look at your fuse board or consumer unit and see if a fuse is blown. So first things first is the location of your fuse board. And this location here where I have my fuse board is a classic location in a UK house. It's by the front door, in the hall, up high towards the ceiling, and that is where so many fuse boards will be found. And you just have to find out where yours is. Here are all the breakers, and when there's a fault, one will trip out or the RCD will trip out. And the way to put the power back on is quite simply lift that back up again, or if that's tripped out. These are a little bit, by the way, these are quite stiff to do. So you have to do quite a bit of power to get that back on again. So if you have a situation where the power has failed to part or all of the house, and your fuse board looks like this, with the RCD having tripped out, and one obvious fuse having gone, this breaker is in the down position, then you can leave this in the down position, in the off position, and you can turn the power on like so to the rest of this section of the house. You've then got an option to investigate what is wrong. You can try pushing it up again, and if it clicks down and the RCD again comes into action, then you'll know that there's a fault that needs looking at. If it was a bulb that's failed, and let's say that's blown and it's put down part of the lighting circuit, actually you will be able to put the breaker back on again and all will be well, and you can just change the bulb. You're going to have to see exactly what has blown the breaker in order to go forward. So I'm going to put that back on because that was just a demonstration. There is another scenario where the RCD trips out and it's not at all obvious what the fault is because all these breakers remain in the up position. And that is a very common situation that you have to deal with, and we'll take a look at that now. So I'm going to induce a fault which will knock the power out, and then I'll show you what I do to get the power back on. So here we are, I induced a fault and you can see that tripped out that RCD. So it's very sensitive, and as you can see this has tripped out, but actually none of the fuses, or should we say none of the breakers here, have tripped out. And this is an absolute classic situation where you'll come to your fuse board, this has tripped out and you think, okay, well why has that happened? And you know, there's no indication as to why it's happened here. So, I mean, particularly if this happens in the dark, you're in a lot of trouble, because a lot of the time, if the fault still persists, and I've got this induced fault still persisting, I'll show you that I'll try and put it back on again, and it won't have it, because the fault is still persisting. So, as I say, you're now in trouble because you can't get any of this circuitry back on again. Incidentally, with a split board, the idea of that is that you'd split the house into sort of two zones, should we say, maybe upstairs and downstairs, and at least if this had tripped out and you can't get this back on again, you at least have this half of the house, as you can see, is still functional. So depending on the nature of your fault, you may or may not be able to reset that RCD. If you can, all well and good. It might be a bulb that just blew, in which case it won't persist on a fault. If, however, you've got some other fault and it's not allowing you to reset that RCD, there is a little trick that might work for you where you can isolate the circuit which is causing the problem and get the rest of these breakers back on again. So here is the method. Let's say it's tripped out. You can't get this back on again. The method is to turn all these breakers off, reset that RCD, which is now possible because all these are off, and then one by one trip these. You can hear little beeps and whatnot going on as I put them back on again. And so each circuit is showing me whether or not there's a fault on each circuit. And let's say there was a fault on this one. You get all the way to the end here. And then you might put this one up and that'll trip out again. So you see the principle that I'm working on. It depends on the type of fault. If it's a sort of fault where somehow, should we say, the earth and the neutral are somehow touching, then you won't be able to get this back on again anyway. It'll permanently keep on tripping out. But you never know. If it's a sort of fault that is not of that nature, you can try this little trick. You can then end up getting the rest of the house on, and you'll then have to investigate to see what this is. Once all of these are in the up position, including that, all that circuitry is back on. You can see all this circuitry is working, and that's pretty much it.